So I want to look at a couple of these, and I realize some of you may have gotten them figured out by now, maybe by guessing, by getting some help or whatever, but I want to talk about how to think through these when you are trying to draw them and how you reason through what is there when maybe some of it doesn't really make sense to you. All right, so we're going to start with number 6. It says, to measure the height of a rock formation, a surveyor places her transit 100 meters from its base and focuses the transit on the top of the formation. The angle of elevation is 67 degrees. The transit is 1.5 meters above the ground. What is the height of the rock formation? Okay. You have to make sure that when you read back through it and do a piece at a time that you don't take the little phrases out of context, because that happens sometimes, and like you try and just read a few words by itself, and that's not really what it's saying. You got to make sure you think about what it means in the grand scheme of things. But there's also sometimes going to be things that you don't know, you don't even know what they are, and they're in this problem. They have nothing to do with math, but you don't know what they are, so you feel like that's just keeping you from being able to work the problems. So how many of you, when you first read this, you had no idea what a transit is? Okay, yeah? Okay, all right, I get it. Where's your paper? You don't have it? Okay, well, get out some piece of paper or something. And how many of you don't really know what a surveyor is? A surveyor. Okay? Does it matter if you know what a surveyor is? No. Does it even matter if you know where a transit is? No. Okay, so it says a surveyor places her transit. So with this whole her thing, I'm thinking the surveyor is a person, right? And so this person places this thing 100 meters from the base. That's all that really, really matters. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it would help you a little bit if you did know, but it really is fine that you don't. Okay, so then let's talk about this rock formation. I could just have like a group of rocks sitting on your table, and it could just be this nice little formation of rocks. But since I am focusing it to the top of the formation at an angle of 67, do you think this is like a small, tiny thing sitting on your table, or just like a ginormous thing outside? Ginormous thing outside, right? So I have no idea what it looks like. So I'm going to say that this, this thing that is my rock formation, whatever it is, right? And so the surveyor, so this person places this thing 100 meters from the base. So the base is the bottom here, right? So I've got 100 meters away. She places this thing, and you have to forgive the crazy writing. It's hard for me to make even circles with this stuff. So that's 100 meters away, whatever this thing is. I just put a little star where we go. Because you don't have to actually draw beautiful pieces of your picture, but if I come over and all you have is just a triangle, and I say, where's the rock formation, where's the transit, you need to be able to tell me. So as long as you have an understanding of where the things are, then you're fine. Okay, it's fine. You don't have to make them all fancy. Yes, sir? Well, I made a squiggly line because it's some sort of rock formation. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to draw like, So it can be a straight, but it can be a straight line segment. That's what I'm saying. Like, you can just do a line segment as long as you know that that's actually representing your rock formation. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so she puts it down here, right? And then it says she focuses the transit on the top of the formation. Does that mean that she's going to put the transit on top of the formation? No, she's focusing it because it's 100 meters away. We know that. Focusing in this case makes it sound like it's like looking at it, right? Or it's focused where that's what we're identifying. So here's the top of the rock formation, and that totally didn't draw anything. There we go. So something like that. Now, we have no idea what this rock formation looks like, and it might not be perpendicular to the ground, but that doesn't matter at all because the distance from the ground is measured as a perpendicular distance regardless of whether or not the rock is perpendicular to the ground. You with me? Even the Leaning Tower of Pisa, how tall it is, that's a perpendicular distance to the ground, not how long the actual building is. So that's what I've got so far. Then it says the angle of elevation is 67 degrees. All right, so I have my horizontal. This is the angle of elevation, so this is my 67 degrees. Okay, so that's all good. Then it says the transit is 1.5 meters above the ground. So this is where things go a little haywire sometimes. So what I normally see, so there's a couple of things that usually happen. Either this is completely blank and people say, I'm confused, I don't get it. And then I say, I can't help you if you have nothing. So usually we can get to about here and then go, all right, well, the transit's supposed to be 1.5 meters above the ground. So people will do that and make that 1.5. Okay? Now, that's not necessarily wrong, except that we've got to fix the picture either way. Because the transit itself, if this is the distance off the ground and the transit's up here, right, then that is what's being focused to the top of the rock formation. So if I'm going to do that, then I've got to move my whole triangle, which is fine. But I would go the lazier route here, especially because I'm not in love with this pen. And instead of doing that, I'm basically going to change where my ground is. Like when I first did this and I was reading through it, this basically represented the ground, right? Because I hadn't really gotten to the point where that's 1.5 meters above the ground. But if I do this, right? And so now this is 1.5 meters, and there's my little transit that looks like a star, and it's 1.5 meters above the ground. That means the ground is down here. Okay? But maybe more horizontal than that. Let me try again. Okay. Yes, in math you can move the ground. There we go. So do you think that your rock formation is like floating out there? No. So since I moved where the ground really was initially, then I have to make sure that this goes all the way to the ground. So this whole thing here is my rock formation. Does that make sense to you? You cannot, and it would look pretty much the same if I had left this part up here and just moved the triangle up. You end up with the same thing either way, but whatever makes more sense to you to make sure that it happens. If all I have is this part out here, I don't have a triangle. But I can't get a 67-degree angle without having a horizontal anyway, so that angle naturally happens in there. You with me? Now, can I find the height of the rock formation in one step? No. Because what I can find here, yes, all I can find here is this part, which is basically this part of the triangle, right? In order to get, or that part of my picture, in order to get the actual height of the rock formation, what do I do after I find x? Add the 1.5. Okay, does that make sense? And I think most of you had already kind of reasoned through and knew you needed to add, but the most frustrating part for most people is getting the picture drawn. All right? And most of the time, if you have something insane on your paper and you're like, this is so confusing, and I come over here and I ask, why did you put 67 here? You're like, I really have no idea. Okay, so then where's the only place that makes sense? And you have to learn to ask yourself those questions. Like when you think you're stuck, you're usually not, and you can usually get a whole lot farther. You just have to look at it and say, okay, what is the only thing that would make sense here? And don't focus on the wrong things like, I don't know what a transit is, so I can't do this problem, right? Because there's going to be words in some of these things you have no idea what they are, and it is completely irrelevant. A transit is a part of its purpose is to measure angles, by the way, if you didn't figure that out. But all right, are we good? Any questions on that? Okay, and once you can set up the pictures, then you can set up the problems, right? Okay, so let's look at number 7. Because before anybody even asks me about number 7, I'm going to cover it because this one always makes my head want to explode. Because most of the time, the reason people are so confused on this is because they don't actually read the question. You look at the picture and you assume things and you're wrong, and so none of it makes sense then, but it tells you everything you need to know here. So here's the first thing I want to tell you, is that this right here is not the river, okay? And even if you don't know anything about canyons and rivers or whatever, you can do this problem because it tells you everything you need to know. All right, so I'm going to undo that because that is not my river. Oops. Okay, so this says, from the top of the canyon, so I'm assuming since there's a picture there, like I'm up here, from the top of the canyon, the angle of depression to the far side of the river is 58 degrees. So up here. In order to have an angle of depression, I have to have a horizontal line. Then I look down. The angle of depression to the far side is 58. So that means this right here, far side of the river, right? Then it goes on to say the angle of depression to the side of the river nearest the canyon wall, so the other side of the river, is 74. So I look straight ahead. I go look down. That's my 74-degree angle. So bam, that is the other side of the river. This is the river. Does that make sense? And you know that from what it says in the problem. Like, it tells you where the two sides of the river are. If all you do is look at the picture and assume all that's the river, it's very confusing. I know on mine, before I colored over it, mine was blue and you could kind of see the beige, but that really doesn't matter anyway. Okay? Even if yours was colored, most of you probably would have done the same thing you did anyway, whether it was figure it out or be confused. So then it says the depth of the canyon is 191 meters. Even if you don't know what that means, it's labeled on your picture. What is the width of the river at the bottom of the canyon? So you're looking for the width of the river. I'm looking for this. So this piece here is the side of this triangle, but this triangle is not a right triangle. So can you do trig on it? No. All right. Do you have right triangles in this picture? Yes. How many do you have? 2. You have this little one right here, and you have this big one right here, right? So what you're capable of finding is you can find this piece, and you can find this whole thing, and once you do, you subtract. So since I already called this X, I would probably call this Y and this Z, or something to that effect. Just don't call everything X. It makes it very confusing. Then as you go through this and find these pieces, what do you need to make sure you're doing in your calculator? Storing the numbers. Yes. Okay. And make sure you can transfer what these angles are to this down here, because it's already all drawn all beautifully for you. Everybody good with that? Any questions? All right, so I didn't draw number 3, but I will tell you, I am always quite amazed at the problems you people have with shadows, okay? You have no concept of what actually creates a shadow, right? The sun, or a light source of some kind, but most of the time in these problems it's the sun, right? So if you're outside, if I'm outside and I'm casting a shadow and my shadow's out in front of me, then is the sun over there? No, the sun is behind me. That's the whole reason there's a shadow, because I am blocking the sun, and that's why my shadow is there. Think about those things. Plus, shadows, if I'm just out in the, there's not like blocked by buildings or anything, but if I'm just out in the middle of a field with a tree, or just me, myself, all, out in the middle of the open, and there's a shadow, where's the shadow? On the ground. If it's floating in the air, it's a ghost, and that is a very scary problem, okay? Think about where shadows actually are. All right. Any other questions on this particular paper about the pictures or confusion? What about the one that I gave you yesterday? Anything that just, okay. Huh? You ask me individually, that's fine. All right, so I'm going to hand out your test review. Your test, remember, is Thursday. I changed it. I cannot make this pop up, but there we go. Your test, I moved to Thursday. I'm going to give you the test review today. So if you are done with both of the worksheets that are due tomorrow, then you can start working on the test review. Okay? We good? And I'll come around and help you answer any of the questions that you have